everyone. This is Tatiana Judiez. I am hosting Thrive and Shine, and we are here live again today in this beautiful Gower Studios that I love. It's so vintage, so cool. So this show is about authentic leadership. It's about authentic power, and it's about conscious leadership. How do we as leaders in this world make sure that we bring the collective consciousness to a different level? How do we contribute to that? How do we lead companies in such a way that it's not just about the bottom line, but it's about how we go through the process of ensuring that the bottom line is in line with our values, with our standards, with the conditions that we provide to the workers who work with us. It's a level of leadership that is absolutely amazing and fascinates me. And as such, I am part of Conscious Capitalism here in LA. It is an organization I've discovered a year ago that I sincerely believe in and support in every way I can. Perfect segue to have today our awesome guest, Lisa Schenk, who is she's actually more than part of Conscious Capitalism. She is the president of the board of directors for Conscious Capitalism. She has a PhD in communication. She's worked with McKinsey and Company. She now has her own entrepreneurship and her own consulting company in so many different levels. I mean, she's working in strategic planning, team building, HR teams, and I wanted her to be on for so many different reasons because, first of all, she's got this awesome part of Conscious Capitalism, and she embodies conscious leadership. It's not just something that we talk about. This is something we live and breathe every day. And she is also part of this Shakti leadership, a fellowship that we have embarked on. I'm part of the fellowship, and Lisa is part of the faculty teaching in that leadership group, and it's all about how we can operate, all of us, from a balance of masculine and feminine energy. It matters that we rise to this level today. So all of this to say, without any ado, we have this beautiful Lisa today. So welcome. Thank you for being part of this show. Thank you for being part of my life. Thank you for teaching Shakti leadership and being a beautiful leader within that world of consciousness and Shakti. So I'm so honored. Thank you for coming. So we're gonna have fun.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. This is so exciting. I love this.
Well, of course. So how did you actually switch from this life you had in the communication world at McKinsey and Company, a very corporate life, a very corporate world, right? I tend to have a lot of entrepreneurs who come on my show for this switch that they make, because so much of the principles behind our leadership is to really be congruent, right, with our values and our heart. And I think it's, from what I'm gathering, even all the ladies that were part of our fellowship this past week in San Diego, we were all studying together in beautiful San Diego University. I've noticed that a lot of these ladies are making the switch. Yeah. They're jumping off their cliff from the corporate world to creating companies that reflect who they really are authentically. And that's really what I'm interested in. That's how I live my life. And I know that's how. But what made you switch? What happened with you personally? And you know?
Well, part of it was a switch, and part of it was just part of who I've always been. So, even, in undergrad, I felt like the world of work was such an important part of what we do. It was where we spend most of our time. Yeah. And even, in the 80s, I could tell that for a lot of people, for most people even, I think that's almost still true, for most people, work sucks.
I can't stand hearing that. It's just so
it's
sad.
just-
Like, why do I know some of the whys.
Right? We know the whys.
Right? We know the whys, and we need to change this one person at a time, right?
Yeah. And so that was really all of my education. My PhD in organizational communication was really directed at understanding why it sucks for people and how it can be better. And so my time at McKinsey was really, I thought of it as sort of a like a residency. I was really learning about leadership there, and working with really large Fortune 100 clients on organizational change and what made leaders really able to shift organizations and shift the experience of their teams. So my business kind of evolved out of that. The real flip for me came actually quite a bit later. And I think this is often the case. I'm writing this book about wild women, and I'm going to have to interview you,
We want to talk about
right?
that. Yes.
But one of the things that I found in that, a part of the foundation of that book is Clarissa Pinkola Este's work on wild women. Remember the book, Women Who Run with the Wolves? And she has this great chapter on Bluebeard. And, if you haven't read that book, now's the time to pick it up.
Yeah.
And if you have tried to read it and found it very difficult to access, try it again.
Right.
I carried that book around with me for 30 years.
30
just
years. Wow.
Now I'm finally really getting it.
Isn't that interesting? I love that because I have that same thing as I have a huge amount of books at home. I love books, and I prefer having a book than I have audiobooks, but I love the smell of a book,
book,
right?
yeah.
And I make little notes. And depending on where you are in life, certain parts of the book will hit you in different
Exactly.
ways, right?
Exactly.
So it's like a constant learning for this one book.
Yeah. Well, and that's what hit me. And so now I tell the story a little bit more differently in hindsight because of that.
Yeah.
But she talks about the predator and how women in particular cannot be initiated into their whole, true, powerful self until they have faced the predator. And the predator turned up in my life in a couple of ways, but primarily in the form of breast cancer.
Wow, I just
Yeah.
got chills everywhere. Okay, that's huge.
Yeah, so I'll tell you a story.
I
because
love that.
Before I had breast cancer, I was, I was kind of more like my typical client. Pretty masculine, strong,
Yes.
playing the game the way the game is meant to be
Face
played.
the predator.
And really, I sometimes now talk about it as armoring up.
yes.
I armored up.
Yep.
You could not mess with me.
Oh,
right?
no.
I have my McKinsey experience.
I hear you, girl.
I got my PhD. I had my leather jacket
Like,
and
yep.
my spiky boots.
Yep. It's like, don't
Right?
F with me because I will crush you.
I
That
know,
was
yeah.
my energy too. Yeah.
You bring your high masculine
Yeah.
and I will bring mine, right?
yeah.
And then we can go head to head. And in fact, I went to work for a period with one of my clients. And I was the head of talent, head of HR there. And the CEO was this very, very aggressive, kind of typical heroic CEO type.
Right.
And he built the company, and the company succeeded purely on his will and the force of his will.
Okay.
And I know going into his office, I used to stop and do push-ups before I went in there.
Right. That's what you were starting to
Yeah.
tell us last week, right?
Just to be strong enough to
Right.
remind myself I am pumped. I will not be messed with.
So he was leading with fear, instigating fear in people on that type of authority. It's power over rather than power with.
Yes, absolutely. This notion of power over became really critical in that time of my life.
Which is mostly how men, there are a few, granted, but generally, we're generalizing here, is usually how men understand power in the corporate world is through fear and that type of authority that is commending and
Absolutely.
not inviting and inspiring.
Exactly. And, in ways it works for them, right?
Well, of
there's
course,
this
because everybody's scared shitless around them.
That's what happens, right? There's this alpha dog thing, and I remember experiencing it where he kind of came into his alpha, and my only options were to power up and puff up against him and
right.
go,
Yeah.
and try to have power over him.
Yeah.
or literally, and I felt like this was in part the feminine, but it's also, you know, the opposite of the alpha, right? Just lay back, like literally pause up in the air or play dead.
Yeah.
Because there was no other option. So I
Right.
would find myself just backing down. You know what? Oh, you're right. I guess I hadn't seen it that way. That's so interesting. You know, maybe could you show me how you came to that so that next time I would, if I could
Fascinating.
completely become submissive,
Right.
that would balance the power out in a way that felt safe.
I love this. This is yeah, so yummy. Continue. I mean, this is the basis for my work as well, and where we are in this Shakti leadership
Right.
group, right? I mean, this is what we need to change, and we are changing it simply by embodying a different type of leadership that is inviting and inspiring around us.
And at the time, I had no idea.
Yeah, well, we don't.
well,
We don't
I-
because this is the format of the patriarchal
Right.
system.
It's
This
the
is
air we breathe. It's the water we swim in.
we are told to behave this way.
We are told, and not only are we told, we just are. We just do.
Well, we just
right?
don't know there is another way.
There has not been another way. So
That's why we're creating another way.
Exactly.
Ladies,
That's
follow us.
exactly right. And I mean, I was one of those women who, when women would talk about how, you know, male privilege and, you know, how women don't make as much as men and women don't have the same opportunities as men, I would get asked about this and I would always say, you know, I haven't really experienced that. I mean, I guess I've just been lucky. And it wasn't until this whole like Me Too thing hit and all of the turmoil we're seeing now, and I went, oh my God, was I kidding? How did I not see that? How did I not recognize that I was actually part of that machine, the same as everyone else? So, but I should go back to the cancer because that was
because that was your predator.
that was my predator. And what happened? The company was so good to me, and I got through cancer, and I did it with the power, right? I was like, what did I say? I said, watch me get through this without missing a beat.
Oh,
And in a way I did.
right.
And it sort of came back to haunt me later a little bit. But one of the things that came out of that was when I came back to work, I couldn't have a meeting with this particular CEO without crying.
Oh,
I ended up in tears every time.
Oh.
And this was like multiple times a week. It was very
oh my
painful.
God! And it must have been so. It must like. What were you thinking? Were you frustrated with yourself when you
Oh
would
my
actually
God,
not
of course
be able?
it was
right?
me, right? It was like, what am I doing? What do I need to learn? What do I need to do differently? Why is this happening? And then two things happened. So one thing was I realized I can't even do push-ups anymore. I had a bilateral mastectomy.
Right.
You know, I haven't been able to do push-ups for 5 years. Like that part of me that could just power through it just evaporated in an instant.
dissolved.
It dissolved.
Dissolve.
So the other thing that happened was a little, kind of maybe a little weird, but I saw an astrologer. And she told me that I was coming through a phase of 30 years of masculine. Sagittarius, for those of you that follow these things. 30 years of masculine, which explains some things in my life. But she said, now I'm embarking on a new phase, 30 years of the feminine. And all emotion, all mystery, all feminine, and powerful.
When she said that, did you understand what that meant when she referred to 30 years of feminine? And I'm asking you this question for a specific reason.
Yeah. What I understood first was what she meant by 30 years of masculine.
Right.
Like I had to go
Right.
there first.
Well, yeah.
30 years of feminine, all I knew was that I was feeling it. I was feeling this rush of the feminine in
And
a
what-
way I never had.
So can you be more specific about what does that mean, the rush of the feminine? What does feminine mean when you
Yeah.
say the rush of the feminine? Because I really want to highlight this for my audience because I am speaking and embodying and supporting women to understand what that means because they don't. Because if someone had come to me when I was facing my predator 5 years ago and would have said, you need to switch to your feminine, I would have been like, what the hell are you talking about? Like, what?
Yeah.
No, I'm feminine. Look at me. Feminine has nothing to do with the way you look.
Right.
Yes, you can look feminine.
Yeah.
There are many ways to look feminine.
Yeah.
But
Well,
the inside is a different story. So what
Yeah.
did it mean at that point for you? How could you actually grab onto this principle with her as she's saying that?
Yeah. Well, like I said, I understood the first part better.
Right.
So for me, the second part, the feminine part, was still a little bit of a mystery.
Right.
I instantly recognized that I was feeling more emotional. I instantly recognized that I wasn't able to put on the mask.
Oh, I
anymore.
love the mask. Yes,
Right, I
that's
had to
one of my big, yep.
Right? I was very connected to my true self, and it really did become pretty clear to me that I couldn't stay in the role I was in. That the preponderance of masculine energy, not only in the leader of the business, but in the structure of the business, was such that I was not going to be able to achieve what I needed to achieve there, and I knew I was not going to be able to be my most true self there.
Right.
So I knew I had to leave and change something.
And I want to simply point out, as we are describing the masculine in a way that sounds perhaps a bit negative, it's this way to lead with authority and fear is what we call in our world the shadow of the masculine. It's not the pure masculine, because the pure masculine is extremely decisive, clear, strategic, and does, to a certain extent, honor the feminine.
Yeah.
Right? So the shadow masculine goes into the shadow of the masculine, which means that it becomes strategic, but with control and fear. It becomes directive, but again, with control and fear. It's not the beautiful masculine that we honor. Right? So,
Right, and to say that it's true of all of us, right? Like I do believe that, we're all four genders. And we all have our high
Absolutely.
masculine, our high feminine, our low masculine, and our low feminine.
Right.
But I believe that businesses take on the the gender of their leaders.
absolutely. And from each organization, you can taste almost the nectar of the leader.
Yes.
Meaning it's the leader that will instill the feel, the energy, the type of leadership, the culture, everything is really trickling down the organization from the leader.
Yeah.
So, yes, it makes sense that you just couldn't stay there anymore with this type of manly leadership that was more about authority and fear than it was about bringing in, an honor of all people and a consciousness. And so then you left.
So then I left and went back to my own business, but I had to reconceive my business a little bit because I was different. So really the top line of my business became about helping organizations be successful by helping people thrive. And
Thrive and shine.
I know.
See?
Well, that's part of what I loved about this. Thriving became what I was all
That's
about.
right.
I need to thrive. My family needs to thrive. Our communities need to thrive. And my clients.
Win-wins.
It's
What
win,
we
win,
call
win, win,
about
win.
win-win-win-win-win, right? Everybody needs to thrive in order for each to thrive.
Yeah, and I truly believe, like I explained to someone, a colleague at the time, about the work I was doing and how I was really connecting people to their heart and to their true expression of themselves in their work and on their impact on the people around them. And she said she was so impressed and that was so fabulous. And she went and looked on my website and she's like, you don't have any of that on your website. And I said, yeah, no, I don't really start with that. And it's still primarily true. I mean, I do believe that all of this thriving
Right.
makes teams, leaders, and companies more successful.
Absolutely.
So that's
part
what
of
you see if you look at the
Right.
surface of the website. But the work is all about helping everyone thrive
and shine
and shine.
for the women.
Yes.
I love that. So then, and how did you become part of conscious capitalism? How did that come into your picture, and when did that happen?
Yeah. I mean,
And why? Like,
it's
I want to
so-
know
yeah.
all of it.
It's so incredible how these threads are all related. Conscious
course.
capitalism and that job I had, and Shakti leadership. So I hired someone to replace me in that job. And that person was
In what job?
in the job that I had to leave.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Right.
I hired someone to replace me first. Right. I
Right.
didn't want to leave them high and dry.
That's honorable.
Well, the person who replaced me was involved with conscious capitalism. And he said, "Oh, we've got to have a chapter in LA." And so he and I and Maureen, who I think you've met, and one other person sat at Plan Check here on Sawtelle and had a conversation about what a conscious capitalism chapter would look like in Los Angeles and how we would start it.
Oh, fabulous.
Yeah.
And when was that?
That was in 2014.
Okay.
I didn't know about the movement of conscious capitalism, but like you, this has been in my DNA
Right.
for so long. So when
Right.
I found out, oh my God, there's a movement,
I know.
I'm in.
It's one of the first things I found out when I landed here a year ago. And I was like, wow.
Well, it really helps me to hear that you found out about it right when you landed here, because we've worked for years to grow this chapter so that people would actually hear about us and be able to come find like-minded folks. So it's so great that people are.
Right. And it was actually through a conference I was attending. Some of the Tony Robbins people were there, so I'm part of that world. So I was invited, and Elaine Yona spoke.
Oh, Ilana. Oh.
Yeah, Elena.
Heart.
I fell in love with her. She was speaking about conscious capitalism on stage, and I literally was hooked, and I tracked her down. I literally got up and I thought, she's going to be I'm going to be the first one who speaks with her. And I literally tracked her down. I was waiting in the aisle until she got off the stage, and I grabbed her. I said, I loved what you just shared. And then we had something in common. She's also spent time in France. And so we started speaking French, and I just loved all about who she is.
She
and so
is
we
the
connected.
first woman I interviewed for my book on wild women.
No way.
She is a badass.
She is. Well, we're
And
all
beautiful.
badasses.
Well, if you haven't interviewed her yet, you should.
I will. She's going through some trauma right now, so I'm giving her the space and holding space with a lot of light and love right now.
But she even goes through trauma with grace, which you asked
does.
about the feminine.
Yeah.
Right.
And so then we're introducing conscious capitalism and the wild feminine.
Yes. Oh, let's see. Maybe I should connect them. Okay, so
Yes.
we start the chapter, and then I meet Raj Sisodia, who is one of the founders of Conscious Capitalism.
Right.
Because he comes and does events for us and describes the movement. And then he introduces us to Nilima Bhatt, whose book Shakti Leadership is incredibly powerful treatise on balancing the masculine and the feminine. And we had Nilima come a few times, and then all of a sudden, Raj and Nilima were planning a trip to India. And they invited leaders from the conscious capitalism community.
That's okay.
That's how I ended up in India.
Okay. Last year.
2 years ago.
Oh, 2 years ago. Okay.
Yes, I think almost. And that's how I got involved with the Shakti Fellowship that you're a part of now.
Right.
Because as we were going through India, we were doing the first step-in phase.
Right.
And then we said, we have to keep going. And so we talked about this 9-month program. And then that program evolved from our experience. The first week in India, then we had calls for 9 months, and then the last week in Israel. And then here we get to be together for a week in San Diego.
That's right. So for my audience to understand what we're talking about when we say Shakti leadership. Shakti leadership is really actually the type of leadership I have been coaching my audience with, meaning it's operating from the fullness of who you are, balancing the feminine energy, the yin, and the masculine, the yang, or you could call it Shakti and Shiva. And it's a way of leading your life. It's a way of self-leadership, in essence, going through life with a knowing and an understanding of what both are, and really choosing to powerfully show up in your life in a way that is extremely congruent and present and includes consciousness, or the conscious type of leadership. So we have a few principles. And so what happened is I was introduced to Nilima, and Nilima is going to be on the show through Stéphane Leblanc, who is the head of this conscious organization leadership in Montreal, which I had just left, which was such a, I didn't know him when I was there. So in fact, when I finally spoke with Nilima, she's then describing pretty much what I've been creating on my own. And I'm like, oh my God, there is somebody else. I had not heard of anyone else creating the same type of leadership I was creating this because I was craving this. Yeah. I had been, wanting another way to lead, another way to show up in the business world, and wanting to share this with women because it's so amazingly, unbelievably powerful and so much easier on us as women, and so much honoring of the man around us. So it's a win-win type of leadership that is called Shakti, and for me, I call it something else, but it's exactly the same thing. Yeah. It's living in a way that is so congruent, powerful, and all about self-leadership. It's all from the inside out.
Well,
right?
And one of the ways Nilima talks about it that I think is really powerful is to say that, I think she says, that maybe it's on the book or somewhere else, it says, but why lead with only half your power?
Exactly. I say that
right?
too.
And that's what I was doing when my whole career was leading with like one arm tied behind my back.
Exactly. I actually talk about it in that, if one of your legs has been cut off, then how do you walk? You walk, what's the expression in English? Lopsided?
With a limp?
Definitely a big limp if you don't have that second leg, right? I mean,
you're really walking lopsided.
Right? I mean, it's like, I just don't come up with the right expression in English, but it's basically a handicap. It becomes a handicap. And so it's really crucial that we are teaching this type of leadership. And in that group, in the fellowship, the point is all gather to become the teachers of this type of leadership, so that we change the world. We change the world one woman at a time and one man at a time. Because, by the way, for the men who are listening to us here, you have feminine energy too. How do you have access to it? How do you use it? Why should you actually use some of that? And, it depends on where you want to be and how you want to show up in your life. But basically, we all have both.
Yeah, I mean, it's so interesting in my work now. I find so much of my work is executive coaching, and I find that I'm trying to coach men to access their feminine. Mm-hmm. And I'm trying to coach women to access their feminine, because somehow the world of business has only focused on
the masculine. Absolutely.
And to your point, not the healthy masculine.
No.
It's focused on the unhealthy, or what Raj calls the hyper-masculine.
That's right, yes.
And so whether I'm coaching men or women, it's about more of the feminine, which is part of why my book is less about balance of the masculine, feminine, and more about just more feminine.
So tell me more about that book, because when we first spoke, we had a quick conversation, and I know you also write a lot of articles that are published, and as a result of even our conversation, you published something and you asked me if you had my permission to quote my name, and we were talking about leadership. And so did this inspiration for the book about wild women come from a desire and want for you to let more of that wild feminine out?
Yeah, let me tell you about the inspiration for that book. It may not be what you think.
Juicy stuff
but it definitely gets to that, right? It's So I still do a lot of work for McKinsey and Company, and I was there at some kind of training for people on the West Coast. And I met this woman who wrote a book called How to Have a Nice Day. I'm sure it's a great book. What a great title. I was like, oh my God, brilliant, right?
Okay.
And then I found out that the way she wrote the book was she interviewed 100 CEOs. And I thought, oh, what do they know about how to have a nice day?
I was just going to say, for what purpose?
I'll end it there. But I thought to myself, gosh, if I was going to write a book, I wouldn't want to interview 100 CEOs. I would want to interview 100 really cool women. And so I just started looking for them.
And they came.
Ilana was one of the first ones I found. Yeah, they came. They're everywhere, these beautiful women who have found a way to be successful and lead with some aspect of the feminine intact. So sometimes I can see them because of how they look, but it's really not that, like you said, right? It's really about them bringing some aspect of all the kinds of things that we think of as the feminine, right? Compassion, caring, nurturing, openness, Shakti, and all of the aspects of Shakti too. So I just thought, look, if I'm going to write a book, if I have to talk to 100 people, they're going to be cool people.
Right.
And I started interviewing women and have now really about 10 solid interviews. I'm trying to decide, am I going to interview 100 women or am I just going to focus on a handful? But I'm pulling learnings from them. I'm a social science researcher by training.
Okay.
So people say, well, what is this wild feminine? And I'm like, I don't know. I'm still trying to find out. I think we could make some assumptions about what it is and not be far off.
So at this point, what does it feel to you at this stage? Because it's going to grow. You're going to learn more. But at this stage, what is the wild feminine to you? And how do you pinpoint what it looks like in business?
Yeah.
Because it's one thing to be a wild feminine on the outside of business. It's another to apply that to the business environment.
Yeah. So there are a couple of things I've learned already from these interviews, and I could probably talk about my own experience.
Yes.
I keep being reminded that I, too, am one of these wild women.
Of course you are.
I think that's right, and my story will no doubt be part of the book. But one of the things I heard immediately when I started doing these interviews is that these women are taking bold steps, right?
Daring.
They're very daring. But when I ask them about the risks they've taken, to a person, they have said, well, I didn't really see it as a risk.
Yeah.
No, what they say is it just had to be done.
Oh
So
my
they
God, I so relate to that.
Right? They do
So
these
relate
big
to that.
things because they are called to them.
Absolutely.
And it's not a risk, it's a necessity.
We were talking about that last night. My viewers do not see, but we have another wild feminine over there, actually, who is part of our fellowship with the Shakti leadership, and we were talking about that last night. How I refer to this bold move of recreating my life, coming to LA, creating this company that is the reflection of my purpose about teaching women and men. I guess I'm going to open up to men as well, about this principle of that wholeness and fullness of leadership, right? And it's a calling. I mean, I've reinvested all I've got into this, and if I were to show my P&L to a banker, they would probably have a heart attack, right? Because it's a calling.
One more banker down.
Right, another one down. So it's a calling.
It's a calling.
It's a calling that you can't explain with logic and words.
Yeah, like one of the gals I interviewed was a very senior consultant in one of the very big firms, very young, very successful, very beautiful, and struggling to be successful to get to the next level, the rung of partner in these firms. It's it's a big step. And so I was coaching her, and she was telling me her life, and she said, I grew up in Tajikistan, and I was leading aid workers through the Afghan desert and negotiating with warlords before I went to business school. And then she just came to the U.S. at 20 on her own, and I had said to her, how did you take such a big risk? And she's like, it was not a risk. It just had to be done to achieve what I wanted to achieve.
Yep.
And then she said the
Love
funniest
that.
thing. She said, she wasn't, part of the problem she was having at the firm that she was at was that she wasn't deferential enough to the very senior people. Like, there's a point at which you have to stand up and be strong, but there's another point at which you have to be willing to back down and say, you know what? Okay, I take your feedback.
Yeah.
And she wasn't doing it. And at some point she said, I'm not afraid of them. Like, they don't even have guns. And I thought,
which is so
wow,
interesting because it shows, her background culturally,
right?
And that play.
Well, and that we actually do experience fear in the boardroom, or
Of
fear
course
in
we
this
do.
group of powerful men.
Yeah.
That women tend to just start to feel our fight or flight mechanisms get into play really easily in those environments for good reasons.
Yeah.
And she wasn't having it, and that's another thing I think in the wild, women overcome that fight or flight.
Yeah, I think it's a training. I think, this woman was obviously trained very early on because of her culture and her environment. And I think that it's a training. I was just watching this morning a quick interview of this guy who I can't even quote the name or the name of the documentary, but he is on Netflix right now, and he's climbing. He climbed one of the biggest cliffs in North America free-handedly with and he trained for 2 years, and they were asking him and they actually did an MRI of his brain to figure out what it is in him that allows him to not have pain or to not experience fear. And he goes, well, I do experience fear, and I have experienced fear, but I've trained myself over time to use fear in a different way. And it's a training mechanism that and I know for myself that I mean, the bold moves that I have made in my last 5 years, I would have never made those when I was 35 even.
Right.
Like, it's not that long ago.
Yes, just yesterday.
It's just yesterday. So I would just not, right? So I've trained myself, and I've grown with a level of fear that to some people is very uncomfortable, and they look at me like, you're crazy. And others are like, wow, this is really cool. And I'm not saying that I don't experience fear, because I use fear, as we were talking about last week, as a GPS. For me, it's like a way to navigate through my life and understand what is still in my way to rise even higher. Yeah. And so, but to each his own, right? I mean, we all have fear at a different level. Yeah. So what else did you figure out besides the daring, bold moves that some of these women take?
Yeah. Oh, well, a number of things. I mean, the fear piece is part of it, right? Mm-hmm. They don't let their fear get in the way of their action. Mm-hmm. So they have fear, like you said. They experience fear.
Yeah.
But they find ways to overcome it, and one of the ways they seem to overcome it that I think is different than the masculine is through community. So they have this phrase, there's fight and flight we talk about, right? You like your limbic system. If you have fear, the blood rushes to your muscles so that you can run, right? Or fight. And that doesn't do you any good at all when you're sitting in a boardroom and then you can't remember what you were going to say because the blood has all literally drained out of your brain.
Yep.
But lately they've started to talk about a third element of survival. Fight, flight, or relate. And women are leveraging relating as a way to manage that fear.
Which is really interesting. That's huge, because that's one of our qualities is we are inclusive. We are all about sharing and talking and communicating. Yeah. This is why we talk so much, and how we resolve things, men, is through talking. Yes. And sometimes when you don't want to hear us, we'll grab the phone and talk to a girlfriend, because we need to talk about this in order to empty ourselves from this weight we have inside when it becomes too much, right? So,
Yes.
so I love that. So it's relating in a way to other women that helps them carry, in
Yes.
fact, that weight.
Yes. Other women and and men who can also
Of course,
engage at that
yes.
level. But one of the things that I thought was fascinating about this, I think is exemplified in one conversation I had with a client years ago. Beautiful girl in the fundraising world, powerhouse, but showing up like full makeup, high heels, tight suits, and working in a fundraising space, a new job where the other women weren't showing up that way.
Right.
And she said to me something. She wasn't fitting. I was helping her because she was not fitting in the culture. And one of the first things she said to me is, well, other women are always out to get me. They're always backstabbing. You really can't trust women in the workplace at all.
Isn't that something we all relate to in some way?
Well, and for me, I said, I have to tell you, this has not been my experience at all. And so we had this long, engaged conversation and coaching experience that lasted over a couple of years with her.
Oh, nice.
Where she really came to see it differently. But I think we get conditioned. We get pit against each other. So there's some data now out there on women who sit on boards. And it says if there's one woman, she's an outlier. Her input doesn't matter. If there are two women, they pit them against each other. This one goes along. Why is that one so difficult?
Consciously or unconsciously?
Unconsciously, in a hyper-masculine way.
Right.
But the data suggests that it actually happens. It's not just somebody's sense of it.
Right.
Sorry, I can't cite it for you. But so when there's one woman, she's an outlier. She doesn't have an impact. When there are two women that get pitted against each other, and it's not until you have three women on a board that they can actually start to see that the board makes different kinds of decisions. So I do think there's something to this notion that in the hyper-masculine, women are fighting to get to the top over... they're stepping on the people they need to step on to get there. And that doesn't go over well in the feminine community.
No, it doesn't. And I'm often asked that question, actually. Why is it that women in the work environment are so competitive? And my answer from my experience and what I've observed and, whatever studies I've read and books I've read on masculine and feminine is that our essence, the feminine essence, is very territorial by nature. And we then mix that with the competitiveness of the masculine world. So we are territorial, and then we go into this business world, which is very masculine. We mix the two. Yeah. And of course we don't know. Yeah. And on top of that, you can add a little bit of feeling isolated because you're by yourself, and you just keep on adding ingredients and factors, and it makes this explosive cocktail of women who are extremely explosive.
Well, what happens?
I mean, explosive and aggressive, and actually not supportive of other women. Yeah. Actually, they'll do anything to take them down.
Well, I have a chapter in my book that's actually called Bitches and Hostiles.
I love it.
Because so often strong women in business are seen as bitches, or they hear that they've engaged in hostile practices. And I had a client I was trying to help through being accused of these things. And she listened to me, and she heard all this stuff about empathy and understanding and caring and communicating. And she said, but you know what? The CEO of my company, nobody says he's hostile when he's going around yelling at people and abusing people and being really inappropriate. But I'm hostile, and I had to stop and say, wow, you've kind of got a point. But it becomes part of one of the findings I have, right, which is that these women who become leaders in organizations through their feminine and with their feminine, from a healthy feminine, don't become bitches and hostiles.
No,
right?
they don't.
Because you don't have to.
You don't have to.
But women have had to.
Because, and this is the premise of how I explain to women why we got where we are. Yeah. is that we have been conditioned to believe. It's a belief system that the only way to get to the top is to elbow your way up. It's to struggle. It's to grind. It's to sacrifice and to be in pain constantly, because we have to adopt, or we believe we have to adopt a way to create success that is very much about the hyper masculine, which is that shadow masculine I was referring to, which is really a negative, fear-based, authoritative type of leadership.
Which takes us back to conscious capitalism, because at the end of the day, it's not about any particular woman.
No.
It's about a patriarchal, hierarchical system
Right.
that we still continue to operate from when we
Right.
don't need to anymore.
We don't have to. And we are, I mean, this is our roles in terms of the type of impact that we want to have on this society and on the world, right? Is to really bring people to this level of understanding. Just understand that there is another way. You do not have to sacrifice yourself, to be in pain, to elbow yourself, to elbow your way to the top, to struggle so much and use fear as your leverage. It's not necessary. There is another way. And that matters. That's so close to my heart. This is my purpose and passion, and I can't wait to read that book. It's going to be so much fun, and I can't wait to do the interview.
I was
We're
going
going
to
to have
wait
even more fun.
It's
Yes,
going to be great. I can't wait as well. Maybe I should interview you on air.
we will.
Just a thought.
We're coming up with really cool ideas on more yummy work together to bring consciousness, to bring more knowledge about what is this all about, and it's a lot of fun, right? I'm having a ton of fun because it feels just so good.
You know, it's interesting. So many of my friends now are so disillusioned with the politics and the corporate Me Too
oh my
stuff,
God.
and
Yes.
and they think this is such a horrible time for women. And I can't help but, because of my involvement with Shakti and with conscious capitalism, it feels to me like this is an incredible moment for women. It's an incredible moment for the rebirth of the way we do everything.
Absolutely. It's all of this, in my opinion, and it was Nilima's as well, we were talking about that, it's a way for us to show up differently. It's a call for the ones who want to rise,
Yes.
and to thrive in a way that is not abiding to the negativity and the darkness that is out there. Yes, we can feel compassion, and we can relate in some ways, but I refuse to allow myself to get to a level where I fall in despair because this is what is around me. I just won't. I refuse to. And this world, and when I was moving here, people couldn't understand why I was moving here. My friends in Montreal and people around me in Montreal said, "You're moving to the States. You know what's happening right now?" I said, "Yes, I'm very aware." And this gentleman, who I'm sure you guys are aware of, I said, "He actually needs me. He needs me. The world needs my light. I choose to stay in the light, and I am refusing to go into the darkness because it doesn't serve. It doesn't help. If we all fold into this despair and darkness, how are we going to create change? What kind of impact are we going to make?"
We need to see the darkness.
We need to,
then we
exactly.
need to turn back to the light.
Yeah, and we need to transmute the density and the darkness into light.
And not hide from it, which I think we have done for as long as women have been women.
Women are full of light, and it's something that comes to us naturally. We are full of light. It comes to us naturally. However, we hide from it sometimes. We want to reduce it. We want to, we shy away from it. I've experienced that so many times that I would do that. I would shy away from it because it's a responsibility to actually step into your light and create that type of impact. It's, with power comes responsibility, and it's a big responsibility. We
Yes.
have a big vision. We have a big job,
We
girl.
do. Better get busy.
We're going to get busy. We are busy already.
Right.
Right? So, how fun is this, right?
So great.
That's
I'll
it.
come back anytime.
Right? And we're done. So thank you so much for joining us. It is such a pleasure to be talking, discussing, having fun with all of you. So please reach out to us. Lisa, quickly, how do we reach out to you? Your site, your website?
Yeah, go to my website,
Lisa Schenk?
schenkconsulting.com.
Okay, schenkconsulting.com. Perfect. And for me, my site, tatianajudiez.com. You can have access to me anytime. And so is Lisa.
Anytime.
Yes. Thank you so much. Take care. Have a great week.
you.
Bye.